Hello everyone and welcome to the greenhouse. Now it's currently the 5th of April and today I will be sowing a few seeds including some cosmos, courgettes, winter cabbage, Brussels sprouts and some pumpkins as well. I'll also give you a quick little tour of the greenhouse and I will be sowing some salads and radish inside an old galvanised tub as well. Hello and welcome to the greenhouse. Now I don't tend to do much filming in here, but seeing as it is the beginning of the season and the majority of our time is spent in the greenhouse now, I thought I would just give you a little bit of a tour and just go through what I am sowing today. It's April, the 5th of April, and the majority of seeds will really come into being sown now, so it's quite a busy time in the greenhouse. This is my dad's greenhouse. He just lets me share it with him, which is really nice. But I mean, we're sharing the allotment, so the seeds that are being sown are basically both of ours anyway. But if you don't have a greenhouse, then windowsills are perfectly fine. I mean, before we had the greenhouse, we relied heavily on the windowsills inside the house, and they weren't a problem at all. You've obviously just got a bit more space in the greenhouse. So what I thought I would do first is just go through a few of the equipment pieces that we use and just explain a little bit more about them. So first I will talk about seed trays. Now for the bigger seeds that we grow, like courgettes and pumpkins and sunflowers, we like to use the bigger module trays just because the seeds are bigger and they might need that little bit of extra room. For the majority of the other seeds, we use these smaller trays, which are really handy, especially if you're only growing a few of each variety. So for us, we only grow 1 or 2 rows of each variety, so we'll only need like 6 to 12 seedlings, which is ample space to grow in these size. I mean, you can have the bigger and you can have even bigger ones. Obviously, if you're growing quite a few of the seeds and you need all of them, then obviously use the bigger size, but these are perfect if you just want a few of each seeds. For instance, I need quite a few calendula this year, so I've grown them in a bigger tray because I know I'll be using them. But yeah, there's no point sowing a really massive tray of purple sprouting if you only need like 4 seedlings. The only other thing that we use really is root trainers, which we've been using for the past 5 years and they've been amazing. We use them for things like beans and sweet peas. I've actually got some sweet peas growing in some now. It just gives those plants that extra bit of room for their root systems to grow because they have quite big root systems, and yeah, they've been really great, so we use them every single year. They're getting a little bit tatty now, but we do reuse them every year. You can also use the individual pots, but we tend to use these when we're potting things up, or we pot things up into the module trays. I do my flowers in quite a lot of them because I have quite a few flowers and it's easier just to put them in the modules and take the whole module up the allotment then when they need planting out. So when it comes to soil, we always tend to use soil which is specifically made for seeds, and over the past year we've been using this lovely company called Dalefoot Composts. They produce really lovely compost with natural ingredients in it. It's peat free, and they also use wool from their sheep in there, which I find so fascinating. But we've been using their compost for seeds when we're sowing the seeds. Then usually after that, when we pot them on, we usually just put them into normal multi-purpose peat-free compost. You can buy potting on compost, which is absolutely fine, but we've always used just normal compost when we've been potting them on. Excuse me. And they've always been fine, so we just keep doing that. But yeah, I think the next thing to talk about is equipment. And you don't need much equipment. You can fork out for things like heated propagators. But what I usually do when I sow my seeds, I take them indoors until they germinate, then bring them back out into the greenhouse, because your seeds will need a little bit of heat to germinate. We also have a heater, couldn't think of the word then, plug-in heater, which we do turn on during the nights when there's going to be quite a frost. But yeah, the only other equipment you really need is like a trowel. You can buy like a special deeper, bigger trowel. I can't think of what the name is, but it's really good for getting in the bags of soil and getting big handfuls of compost out. I also would recommend using a sieve just to create a nice fine layer of soil to go on top of the seeds. It will make their life a lot easier. In the past, I have just put on compost without using a sieve, and I found that the seeds will just push up the layer of compost because they can't quite push their way through the big chunks. So a sieve is always good. And then there's things like these that you don't necessarily need, but they are really, really good. And I think they're called a tamper set. So they're just little stamps, but they're really good. I mean, when you put the soil in, you can push it down them. I mean, you can do it with your fingers, but this just makes life a little bit more easier. And my dad made these for me, so they're very cherished. The only other thing that I really love using is this little tool, and it's called a widger. Yeah, I don't know why it's called a widger, but it's got two ends to it, one slightly smaller, one slightly wider, but it's really good at going into the compost and pricking out those little seedlings to pot on. It's so handy. Obviously, honestly, can't recommend that enough. This actually belonged to my granddad as well, so I really, really love it. Use it all the time. I think the only other thing to really talk about is the seeds, and obviously you will have particular companies that you really like buying from. I know some companies will offer different varieties of seeds, so obviously if you want that particular variety, you'll have to go with that company. I've used quite a few over the years: King's, Thompson & Morgan, Sutton's, Unwin, sorry. Quite a few different seed companies, but I mean, I don't think there's too much difference. Obviously you can get special organic ones. I know Real Seeds are really good, but I do tend to buy all my flower seeds from a company called Chiltern Seeds. I think they're quite a small company, which is really nice, but they always have the best flower seeds and the best varieties, a little bit more quirky and a little bit more different, which I really, really like. So yeah, I do always tend to use Chiltern Seeds for my flowers, but usually just a mixture of my vegetables. All depends what I'm growing and if they have that variety in stock. So yeah, that's all the equipment really you need. Obviously you need a watering can to water, and I would recommend a watering can with a finer spray on it, just so you don't completely flood out your seeds. Last thing I will talk about is my planning. I do tend to go a little bit over the top with my planning, but it's proved really successful in the past. So I have my allotment notebook, which I take everywhere with me. It's got every type of note and list and plan and everything in it. Then I've got my gardening diary, where every time I go up the allotment or sow some seeds, I write in the day what I've done, which is also good to really look back on. And then I've got the spreadsheets, which me and my dad have been doing for the past couple of years now, and it's proved really successful. It's been amazing. So I've got a spreadsheet with the list of what I'm growing. So there's one for vegetables and one for flowers, but it basically just has the vegetable, the variety, the quantity of how much we need, when it needs to be sown indoors or sown outdoors, planted out and harvested. And then we also print out one which we can fill in. So again, it's got the vegetable, the variety. Then we need to fill in these parts when it's sown indoors, sown outdoors, when it's germinated, when we potted it on, planted it out, and when we harvest it. It might seem a little bit over the top, but it's really handy. And I mean, now at the beginning of every month, I look through it, I see what needs to be sown at the beginning of April, and I do it, and then I fill it in. It's also a really great way of looking back next year, because you can say, oh, you know, they grew really well, I sowed them back in middle of April, then I'll do it again this year. So yeah, it's handy. If not a little bit over the top. The other thing I will just quickly say about seed packets, obviously it's great to read the back of them, but it all depends where you live, what area you live in, and also the weather. So for instance, if something says that you need to sow it at the beginning of March, but you have an awful March and it's just rained like it has done here for the whole of March, it doesn't matter. You can leave them a couple of weeks, you can leave them a month. It all depends on the area where you are, when the last frost date is, and the weather. So I wouldn't worry too much if you go off-piste with what it says on the back. Just trust yourself, trust your gut, and yeah, go by the weather and your local frost dates. I think ours is usually around the middle of May, so still got quite a while until the majority of things can be planted out yet, so there's no rush at all. So the seeds I'm going to be growing today, let me get that list. I'm going to be sowing two varieties of Cosmo, 2 varieties of courgette, 2 varieties of pumpkin, then a winter cabbage, some sprouts and some kale. Now the majority of seeds only need a fine layer of soil of them. I know most seeds, you know, you only need to sow them at about 1.5 centimetres deep. Obviously the bigger seeds like the courgettes and the pumpkins, you'll need to sow them a little bit deeper, probably about 2 centimetres or a little bit more, just because they're bigger seeds and they need that little bit more of room. But yeah, seed sowing is very, very easy. It's just they can be a little bit fussy when it comes to heat, which is why I take them indoors to help them germinate. But this year hasn't been too bad for germination results. But let's get sowing these seeds, and I'll just quickly talk through the varieties as we sow them. So all I've done with these seeds is I have filled each of my tray up with the seed compost. I've patted it down and very thinly sowed my seed out onto the top. So I've got my winter cabbage, which is a January King, got my Brussels sprouts, Bedford, kale, Nero di Toscana, and 2 varieties of Cosmos. One is Dazzler and the other one is Fizzy Rose Picotti. So I'm just going to sow the last one, which is the Fizzy Rose. You can either put them into your hand or just scatter them over the top there. I would always suggest sowing a few extra seeds just in case they don't germinate. Just try and scatter them so they've each got a little bit of space, but I mean you will be pricking them out once they've sprouted anyway. So now all I'm going to do, and these are all at about 1.5 centimeters deep, I'm just going to use my compost and my sieve to put a nice layer of compost on top of them. And then what I will do is I will sow the pumpkins and the courgettes, because they will be sown a little bit differently to these ones. So the last seeds I'm going to sow today are my courgettes and my pumpkins. Now I'm growing 2 varieties of courgettes. One is a yellow one called Sunstripe, and then one is a green one called Romanesco. I've sowed 4 of each of these, but I really only need 2. But like I was saying, it's always best to sow a few extra seeds just in case. Now I've got 2 pumpkins. These are 2 small varieties which I will be growing up our wigwams in amongst our little pumpkin patch. They are Baby Boo, which are these lovely little white ones, which I've never grown before, but I'm so excited to grow them. And then the good old favourite Munchkin pumpkins, which again are a small variety. I've grown these before, but never have I ever grown as a successful crop as my first year growing these. So I'm gonna keep trying and seeing if I can reach those 32 harvests that I got in the first year. Also, I don't think I mentioned this seed company earlier on, but they are called Seedaholic, and with every seed packet you get this really nice informative little bit of paper with it's packed full with information, which is so handy. I also bought some giant poppy seeds from them as well. So I'm just going to sow my Munchkin pumpkins. I'm going to sow 6 of them because I think I need about 4. But like I was saying earlier, I always use these module trays for my bigger seeds, just because they need that little bit of extra room. And what I do with my pumpkins and courgettes and all the bigger seeds actually is I sow them on their sides. This will just prevent them rotting in the soil. Just going to choose a different seed. That one feels quite flat, quite empty. And that's done. So they're all sown about 2 centimetres deep. So what I will do now is I will use the sieve again just to put a nice layer of compost over them, and then I'll give them all a good water. I've also just labelled them as well. Very, very important. We use these wooden labels now. I think you can buy a really big pack for like £1 from a craft shop, and you can just write on them with biro. So I just write the variety and the date that I've sown them. So make sure you give your seeds a really good watering. They will need that bit of water and the bit of heat just to help them germinate. So now all that's been sown, I'm going to give you a little tour of the greenhouse. There's not much to show because it's only 8 foot by 6 foot, but we will have a tour nonetheless. Now, as you can see, there's a big cherry tree to the side there that creates a dappled shade on the greenhouse. And I know that is on the list of things that will be going from the garden. I think it's been on the list for a couple of years now, but it is going to be cut down, which is a shame because it's beautiful, but it does create this shade on the greenhouse. So yeah, it's only 8 by 6. So we utilise the space. We put up this staging here to put our trays of seeds on. And then once all the seeds have grown up and moved out, I know that there's tomatoes and cucumbers, I think, going in here, so it will just give them that room to grow up. Then obviously there'll be bamboo put in here as well to help support the tomatoes and the cucumber. And I think he wants to grow potatoes this winter as well to get some for Christmas, which will be quite interesting because we've never done that before. So I'll just go through a few of the things that are growing here at the moment. There's some Honesty, Ranunculus, Leeks, Amimagus, Zinnias, Scabious sunflowers, Swiss chard, nasturtiums. The red cabbage has just germinated. Then there's some squash, some calendula, more scabious, purple sprouting broccoli, straw flowers, cauliflower, tomatoes, broccoli, and some basil. So quite a lot of stuff, but we've only sort of filled half the greenhouse, and that's because we only grow a small amount of each variety. So yeah, a lot of stuff, but just little amounts of each one. The only other thing that we've got growing in here is growing in this structure here. Now, this is just simply guttering, and the guttering brackets are attached to the side of the greenhouse. My dad always grows his peas like this in the guttering, in 4 lengths of guttering, and then what he used to do was, once the peas were ready, take them up the allotment, dig a trench, and then slide the guttering into the trench and it was just such an easy thing to do. However, he's not growing peas this year, so we didn't really need the guttering system. But what he has done instead is sow some lettuce and some rocket inside this length of guttering. I think what he's going to do is do it successionally, so they've got some throughout the whole year. And then all they're going to do is just cut off the tops and use them in salads and sandwiches and things like that. And obviously they will be successional, so yeah, throughout the year they should have some nice fresh salad to eat. Now there's a heated propagator at the end there. My dad uses that, that is his. I tend to just take my seeds inside to germinate indoors. Still does the same job, but it obviously makes your house look a little bit messy. Then we have our potting bench, which is just an old galvanised dairy trough. There's a shelf underneath where we keep all our trays and things like that. And there's a shelf on the top where we keep labels and odd bits and bobs. And we also hang our tools there as well. Then we usually just keep our bags of compost wherever we can, wherever there's room. Right now the tomatoes aren't in, so the bags of compost just stay underneath the staging. This area is a little bit messy still. There's just odd bits on here, some succulents at the end there, which we propagated to use in the garden shows. But obviously they're not going ahead this year. There's some old honesty there, and yeah, that's a little bit of a messy side. But like I said, we haven't had to use this side much this year until obviously we start potting on, and then there'll be lots more pots. But yeah, I think that's about it. There's automated brackets on the windows, so obviously if it gets too hot the windows will open, which is great. But yeah, I think that's about it really for the tour. Not much to show, but yeah, it does us. It does us. This little greenhouse is the perfect size for us, and I mean, we don't have a very big back garden anyway, so it's perfect. But I think the last thing to do is to sow some salad and some radish in an old galvanised trough, and then have some lunch, I think. So today I will be planting up this beautiful old trough with some salad and some radishes. So we can just come out into the back garden and pick these whenever we want to all summer long, because I will be sowing them successionally. So we actually sell these in our online shop, and we also sell galvanised bathtubs and enamel planters, which are absolutely perfect if you do not have the growing space or a back garden. So they're perfect for patios and balconies, just anywhere where you don't have the space to put anything straight into the ground. So what I have done is I have drilled holes in the bottom just for some drainage. If you're leaving these outside, you will need to create drainage holes just to stop them flooding. You do not want that to happen. Nothing will grow. So I'm just going to fill it up with compost. I'm using this peat-free compost, just multi-purpose. And I'm going to fill it so it's very nearly to the top. Give the soil a good push down so it's all nice and compact. And in this container I will be sowing 2 rows, so I'll have 1 row of the salad and 1 row of the radish. And they're quite simple to sow. I'm just going to create a drill with my finger about 1.5 centimetres deep. Along there. I think I'll sow the salad leaves first. Now this is a crispy lettuce leaves blend, so it's a mixed variety. And they should be ready to eat within 40 days, which is perfect. Just going to put some in my hand there and just lightly sow them in the drill. And then what I'll do is I'll cover them up and then do exactly the same with the radish. So the radish variety that I'm growing is French breakfast, but there are so many lovely radishes that you can grow. There's pink ones, purple ones, long ones, round ones. There's just a beautiful array. So these should be ready to pick in the next 40 days. And then what I will do after that is I will successionally grow them, so I've got a crop throughout the whole of the summer. Last thing to do is to just pop the label in and give them a really good water. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.